Presenting for tonight's Florida School Counselor Association webinar is Rick DeWalt. Rick, a product of the Palm Beach County School District, is in his 38th year as an educator, reinvesting in the community in which he was raised. He has served as a classroom teacher, department chairperson, athletic coach, school counselor, and is currently the Park Vista School Counseling Instructional Team Leader. He has been recognized at the district and state levels for his outstanding accomplishments in the field. He is particularly noted for his expertise in data analysis, program planning, and college and career readiness. Rick and his wife Beth, also a public educator, have been married for 35 years and have 2 children. Also presenting tonight with Rick is Megan Stair. She is also a product of Palm Beach County Schools, and Megan has been an educator for 22 years, with the last 12 as a school counselor. She was recognized as the 2018 Florida School Counselor of the Year and has worked with the RAMP program at the local, state, and national levels. She works extensively with the Ask a National model, as well as the implementation and documentation of comprehensive school counseling programs. Megan and her husband, Brendan, have a classroom teacher, have 3 daughters. Megan and Rick, you now have the floor. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. Thanks for tuning in tonight. So we're picking up with phase 2. We are following up with phase 1. If you weren't able to watch phase 1, it's posted on the FSCA YouTube channel. Phase 1 went into a lot of the data collection pieces. So we're picking up with, now that you have your data, now that you know what your data says, what are you going to do? How are you going to build your program based on that data? And so the 4 big areas that we're going to cover, we're going to look at writing annual student outcome goals, looking at picking out your mindsets and behaviors, and then developing the annual administrative conference form and meeting with your administrators, finally putting together your school counseling advisory council. So to start with, we have your, we're starting with the annual student outcome goals. So these are the big goals, the annual focus that you're going to have for your program. They are going to be based on academic attendance or discipline data, and that's what ASCA refers to as outcome data. So you're looking for some of those pieces, whether you're looking at test scores, grades, you're looking at absences, you're looking at discipline in terms of maybe suspensions or some other form of discipline at your school. But you're looking for, based on that data, you want to drill down and figure out what your school's needs are. And you're going to want to see how your data, the data that you have identified, fits with the school improvement plan. So what your school overall, the data that they have identified, you are, and then you're also going to be able to use the school data reports, but then supplemental data. So that's going to be things like needs assessments and those sorts of things that that you are able to identify. And again, that was a lot of what phase 1 covered, how to gather all of this information. As you're writing your student outcome goals in terms of RAMP, one thing that's really important to recognize is that your goals don't necessarily encompass your whole program. They're focusing on what this annual need is, and you're really drilling down to a specific group of kids that you see are in most need. So it doesn't have to be like your big overarching goal for your program. For example, at the high school level, every year we're focused on graduation. Graduation rate is one of our goals every year, but rather than having one of our program goals be graduation, what we're going to look at is who's most in need within our school, who's most in danger of not graduating, and we're going to create annual goals based on that data. So your annual student goals or annual student outcome goals, they're written in the SMART goal format, and ASCA has a template that you're going to use. You need to include the end date, the targeted group, the specific data point that you're targeting, the measure of change. So you're going to change, something is going to decrease by 10%, or it's going to increase by 20%. You're going to have that measure of change. And then within your goal, you'll have both the baseline and the target data. So it started at this number and it's going to be this number by the time you're done. And like I said, you'll want to use Ask Us template for this. And one of the tips that I was given was, if you can't fit your goal into the template, if your words don't fit into the boxes of the template, then you're probably going to want to reword it. That's kind of giving you the tip that you are that you've missed something within that SMART goal format. And so you'll want to try to go back and look at the data again, or rethink the way that you're writing that goal, so that it does fit within Ask Us template there. So let's look at a couple of examples of goals. And so again, we're assuming that you've run the data reports and you've seen a need that your program is going to address. So here's an example of a student outcome data written in that SMART goal format. So by May 20th, 2022, 4th and 5th grade students with more than 5 absences in the first quarter of the school year, which would represent 10% of the days missed, will decrease the total number of absences accrued during the second quarter of the school year by 30%, from 90 to 63. Sometimes these goals do end up sounding a little wordy, and that's okay if they are a little wordy. That was hard for us to get used to. But again, if you look, all of the pieces are there from that SMART goal format. So you have your end date, you have a very specific targeted group, you have the percentage of change, what is going to be changed, and then your baseline and your target data. So this is an example of an elementary student outcome goal. Next here we have one from middle school level. By June 2022, male students receiving 1 or more days of out-of-school suspension as a disciplinary consequence during the 2020 to 2021 school year will decrease the aggregate number of disciplinary suspension days during the 2021-2022 school year by 10%, from 367 to 330. Once again, we have a specific end date when we're going to have this goal met, when we're hoping to have this goal met, a specific targeted group. We're not saying we're decreasing suspensions altogether. We've targeted specifically this group of kids. And then what is being decreased by what percentage, and then baseline and target data. And then to give an example, this is at the high school level, an example of a student outcome goal. By June 2022, 9th grade students who are earning an F in core content classes at the end of the first quarter will decrease the cumulative number of Fs by 20%, from 78 to 64. We're going to look at a couple of non-examples of goals, talking about some things that that aren't necessarily a good fit for that format, for that SMART goal format, or within what Ask is looking for as part of the RAMP process. So in this example, we're looking at a school counselor wanting to increase the number of students that participated in a small group. And so the goal was written, by June 3rd, 2022, the number of students who have completed a small group on conflict resolution will increase from 25 to 40. So while this might be a goal that you would have as a school counselor, that you'd like to increase participation in your small groups, it's not the best fit for a student outcome goal. First of all, it does not represent outcome data. So outcome data needs to be academic, attendance, or discipline. It needs to be hard numbers. So participation in a program is not going to be outcome data. The other thing that you'll see, there's no measure of change here. So it doesn't tell us we're increasing it by a certain percent. And then the target group needs multiple descriptors. So who are these kids that you're targeting with this group that you're putting together? So let's say you as a school counselor identified this as a need in your program. What might be a better way to write that goal in terms of what the ramp process and looking at those annual student outcome goals. And so here would be a better way. You could still target the kids that needed that small group. You identified them in data, but now what you're going to say instead is who were those kids? And because it was a conflict resolution group, maybe it was students that had discipline referrals for fighting. And so what you're going to do is you are going to decrease the number of male students with discipline referrals from fighting, and they're going to decrease by 15% from 53 to 45. So what your outcome data became was that discipline data of the number of discipline referrals for fighting. Now, keeping in mind with this goal, one of your interventions to implement or to try to meet this goal, one of your interventions could be that small group on conflict resolution. So it's still fitting with what you felt you needed. It's just a better way to track it in terms of outcome data. So another non-example of a goal would be all SY22 seniors will graduate. And like I said at the beginning, one of the big things about a goal like this is that you aren't really targeting who really needs help. According to your data, what is the group of kids that aren't on track to graduate that you are really going to be supporting through this goal? But some of the other things that you'll see, there's no end date, right? There's no measure of change, no baseline data, no target data. That's one thing that can sometimes be hard, is when you're trying to say all students will do something. Again, you haven't really drilled it down to the group that most needs it. So having that baseline and target data kind of helps you think in terms of who is it that you're really focusing on, who is it that really needs the support in order to reach the target. So instead of looking at saying all SY22 seniors will graduate, again, think about who is it that isn't on track to graduate. And in this example, we're going to say that it's Hispanic students, and we're going to say that the reason that they're struggling towards graduation is GPAs. So we're going to say the number of Hispanic seniors with GPAs below the graduation requirement of 2.0 will decrease by 70% from 35 to 10. So we've drilled it down to that specific group that our data has shown needed to be addressed. And then we're going to give that specific measure of change, the target, and baseline data to show what we're working toward. So this right here, these are our goals, just to give you an example from our school counseling program. So these are Park Vista's 2 annual student outcome goals for this school year. Again, clearly, this is not the only thing that we're doing in our program, but here are 2 needs that we saw in our data. So the first goal that we have by June 3rd, 2022, seniors who were absent for 70 or more periods in SY21 will decrease their average number of periods absent by 20% from 150 to 120. So what we saw is that particularly last year's juniors struggled the most with attendance. We chose to look, as we were looking at the data, we chose to focus on periods absent at the high school level. You know, you sometimes see students that will come late to school or will leave early. So we were really focusing on periods rather than whole days of absences. And we wanted to address in our district, students that have 10 or more absences are considered chronically absent. And we as a district, as a school, we try to address that. So we looked at 70 periods because at our school we have 7 periods in a day, 10 days would be 70 periods. So we wanted to target those kids that were chronically absent. We have about 181 of our seniors. Our senior class is just under 800. About 181 of them fit this mark, that they had 70 or more periods of absences as juniors. When we average their absences together, we see that those 181 students had an average of 150 periods of absence, an average among them. So we're looking to decrease the average. One reason why it's a good idea as you're working with your goals, it's a good idea to often focus on those averages, because what we could have said was we want to reduce the number of seniors who have more than 70 absences. But then what we do by doing that is we don't get to track the kids that made improvement, even if they didn't make it all the way to the target of no longer being considered chronically absent. So for example, unfortunately, and we all know what last year was like, but we had some students who had 300 periods absent last year. If they turn that around and this year they're only marked absent for 150 periods, that's a huge change. Unfortunately, that kid's still considered chronically absent. So if we were to write the goal as the just tracking the number of kids who were chronically absent, we're going to miss a lot of that positive movement. So by writing the goal so that we're taking the average number of absences, what we're doing is being able to capture some of those kids who made improvement without making it all the way to the finish line. Of course, ideally, all of these 181 kids that we're tracking this year would not be chronically absent. Our second goal here, you can see this is also what's called a closing the gap goal, because we were looking specifically for a gap. With this goal, by June 3rd, 2022, 10th grade Hispanic males with GPAs below 2.0 will increase their average GPA by 25% from 1.2014 to 1.5. So with this, what we did was we took our GPA data and we found overwhelmingly that this year's 10th grade class at the end of last year, there were about 11 or 12% of our current 10th graders that were below a 2.0 GPA, which was much higher than our junior and senior classes. So we focused in on those 10th grade kids. Okay, who specifically within this 10th grade cohort needs the most support? And as we drilled that data down, while we didn't see huge differences as far as our attendance with gender or race, our data overwhelmingly showed us that we had this huge gap with our Hispanic males. And so we're tracking 35 10th grade Hispanic males with GPAs below a 2.0 this year. And again, the same thing. Some of these kids came out, one of our young men that we're tracking has a 0 GPA or had a 0 GPA at the beginning of the year. So we're tracking some kids that weren't going to be above a 2.0 in one school year, but we're definitely seeing some movement. And we're going to be able to best show that within our goal by looking at the average GPAs. So again, we're trying to increase their average GPA from about a 1.2 to a 1.5.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
We had a new principal this year, and our other principal is on board all the time. We have a brand new principal, so we were I guess bringing him on board last year. So we sent him the Ask a Model book to read, which he did. And when he came in, one of the first things he said is we need to focus on, he's a very data-driven guy, and he said we need to focus on 10th grade Hispanic males. And I said, well, before you do that, come visit us, because that was one of our goals. So it fit nicely in with his goal, and our goal meshed very beautifully. And he was on board with it and is on board with it all the time.
Absolutely. And that goes back to saying before, you know, a big part of when you're looking at your data and you're building these goals, you want to also refer to things like the school improvement plan and what is it that your administrator cares about, because that's what your program, you're of course supporting those school-wide goals as well. So that's kind of the end of the outcome data. So once you've built those goals, once you see what's your focus of your program going to be, then you're going to turn to the mindsets and behaviors, and how are you going to help your students to achieve the things that they need in order to be able to achieve those goals. So the mindsets and behaviors are the school counseling standards, right? This is what we want students to be able to do. The knowledge, skills, and attitudes that they need. This is the specific things that we're going to teach them, the specific skills that they are going to have, the specific things that they'll be able to do because of our program. And so there's kind of like, there's three, kind of a quick vocab lesson, three big words. So the mindsets are the attitudes or beliefs that students have about themselves in relationship to their academic work. The behaviors are the visible outward signs the student is engaged in putting forth to learn. And then the competencies or the learning objectives, those are the specific measurable expectations that students attain as they make progress toward the standard. Now, this is something that's available on the ASCA website. If you haven't had a chance to look at these standards yet, you can just Google ASCA mindsets and behaviors, and it's going to bring you up right here. You see the first page of the it's like a 4-page brochure, and it'll show you all of the mindsets, all of the behaviors that the ASCA has identified. And what you're going to do is you're going to use your data to identify those mindsets and behaviors that your program most needs to address. And so you'll take those standards that you've identified. So my student is, for example, my student is has too many Fs, where I'm looking at kids with Fs in the first 9 weeks, and I'm trying to decrease those Fs second 9 weeks. So what were the reasons that those kids earned those Fs? And what are the skills, the mindsets that they need in order to improve those grades? And that's what your mindsets and behaviors are going to help you drill down to. Here are the things that my kids need. And you'll use your supplemental data, and you'll use input from, from your stakeholders to help identify these are the things that our kids are missing. And then when you have those standards, you're going to operationalize them through those learning objectives. Now, ASCA on their website, they have a whole bank that you can search where you can put in, this is a mindset that I'm working on with my kids, and what are some examples of some of those learning standards that I could use. But of course, you can also write your own based on the lessons and based on the activities that you're doing. So here's an example. So we start with that data demonstrated need. So discipline referrals for fighting among 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. So here's the need that we found. We're going to try to decrease those numbers, the number of discipline referrals. So we need to know, why are those kids getting those referrals? What are the things that they don't know, or what's the support that they need? And so again, you'll use supplemental data. You'll talk to your stakeholders. Maybe it's a needs assessment. Maybe it's something with your teachers, but you'll figure out what is it in your student population that's leading to these discipline referrals. And so in this example, the school counselors identified that this target group of kids needs to work on their self-discipline and self-control and demonstrate effective coping skills. And those are 2 specific behaviors in the mindsets and behaviors. And so once you've identified, okay, so here are the standards that my program is going to address, you operationalize. What's it going to look like? How will I know that the students have achieved that? And so in this case, those competencies or those learning objectives are, students will know the consequences of getting into a fight, and students will identify conflict resolution techniques. So here is our Park Vista example. So again, thinking about those 10th grade Hispanic males that we are focusing on this year, there were really 2 big things in our supplemental data that came out that we needed to address. First of all, we had a group of kids who went home for the end of 8th grade and spent most of 9th grade at home with very little transition support to as far as like the nuts and bolts of being a high schooler. Taking notes, being organized, time management, those kinds of things. So we definitely knew we needed to teach them those skills. And then along with that, a lot of these kids, because they came to our campus, they didn't have a real freshman orientation. They didn't get that same level of support that you would give 9th graders. they really didn't know who on campus to reach out to. They didn't know, if I have a problem, what should I do? So those were the two big things that we wanted to focus on, the two big behavior standards. We're focusing on those study skills, and we're making sure that they have positive relationships with adults that are going to support their success. And so what does that look like as far as our learning objectives? At the end of this year, we want these 10th grade males to be able to tell us at least one resource they can use to identify or to manage their time. And we want them to be able to pick out 2 adults that they can reach out to when they need extra help at school. So then moving on, your annual administrative conference. Excuse me. So you as a team, you have the goals that you're going to be working on. You have identified the mindsets and behaviors that you plan to target, and you've put together an overview of what your school counseling program is going to look like for that year. Now, with the annual administrative conference, what you're doing is you are documenting a formal discussion between you and your administrator to be sure that your program is addressing the needs that your administrator sees, it's in line with your school goals, and it helps the administrators to understand what your program is doing, what your focus is throughout the year. And this becomes such an important tool for advocacy. Like Rick was saying, with our small group of those Hispanic males that were already on the mind of our principal, we came together at our annual conference this year, and it just really clicked. We were able to work together really well and focus our program on something that was important to our principal. And now our principal knows when we're telling him we'd like to have, a small group for these guys, he's on board with that. Absolutely. What can I do to support you as you have that small group? There is a template that you use. So you fill out the template. What you'll do is fill it out yourself as part of your planning, but it's a draft, and then you take it with you to the conference. We typically, the information that goes in the form, Rick, as our department chair, is working in those weekly leadership meetings with our administrators. He's kind of already talking about some of the things that we're working on, and we are already getting some of their feedback, some of the administrators' feedback before we put it on that form. You take the form with you to the conference where you actually go through it step by step. And you can see this is the first page of the annual administrative conference form. You're going to have your goals there. You're going to have your use of time. You'll have one for each counselor if you have more than one counselor on your campus. A lot of what's on multiple counselors' forms are going to be similar. For example, the annual student outcome goals are going to be the same for every counselor. But the use of time and some of the other fields will be slightly different. So you'll have it updated, for each counselor. And then in the conference itself, you might find that you need to make some changes, that there might be some things that your administrator brings up that you want to work on or you want to update. You're going to discuss your use of time. So this is a really important, again, an advocacy tool, because you're going to, as you show your administrator, here are my outcome goals for this year. Here's my plan for how I'm going to address it. You are going to be able to say, last year, here's what my use of time looked like. This was how much direct time I had for direct services. This is how much time I had for indirect services. And then you're going to be able to talk to your administrator about your goal. This is what I would like next year's, this current year's use of time. So if you're not meeting those, those recommendations of ASCA, this is a tool that you can use where you can advocate for yourself to have more of that time for direct and indirect services. Again, you'll also go over, there's a part there within the form where, you'll review your annual calendar. You'll talk about what your classroom and group goals are and the closing the gap action plan. Throughout the meeting, you do want to keep minutes of the discussion, and if there are any changes made to the form, you're going to document that in minutes, and that is part of your RAMP application, is that you have those minutes and that they show a rich discussion, that it isn't just you telling your administrator, here's what I'm going to do, but there was a back and forth. There was a discussion, questions were asked, input was given, that sort of thing.
Yeah, if I can piggyback off that, it's also a building block. Doing it the first year and getting on board is one thing, but if you've done it year after year after year, they're on board with you and they're coming to you with these suggestions also. Not just you telling them what you would like to do, but them suggesting what they would like for you to do, other than non-counseling type activities.
Right. As high school counselors, we talk about it a lot. We're very blessed because we have an administration that, that sees what we do. And this process of documenting our program through RAMP is a big part of them being able to see what we do. But the result is that we have a lot of direct time with our students, which isn't always the case at the high school level, particularly. But we are very blessed that our administration recognizes that what we're doing is meeting the needs of our kids. So then just quickly, this is my annual administrative conference form for this year. You can see again, our goals are on there. Our use of time. So this use of time, I don't know if you can see that arrow that I'm using. Our direct and indirect services were a little off, but of course that, with so few kids on campus last year, we didn't have the opportunities for direct student services that we usually do. We're hoping to get back to that this year with our 60-20, 20% for program planning and then 0% for non-counseling duties. Here you can see you identify your ratio. So at our school, we divide our caseloads by alpha. So my alpha is identified there, right? This year I have 494 students in my alpha. Program implementation plan to address priorities. So this is where you're going to be showing your administrator, here are the mindsets and behaviors that I've picked out. And these are the things that I'm doing, the classroom guidance, or I'm sorry, the classroom school counseling lessons, or the small groups that you're holding. You're closing the gap action plan, and then your annual calendar. What's your program going to look like over the year? You're going to give your administrator an overview of your advisory council, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Any professional development that you plan to participate in. Of course, at the beginning of the year, I don't always know everything I'm going to do all year long, but this is what I knew at that time. And then committees that you're a part of, any materials that you use, the annual budget, what you agree on for the office, what your office hours are going to be, and what that's going to look like. And then the last page here has a breakdown of everyone who supports in our office. So we have our school counseling department assistants, we have our attendance clerk. These are all school-based personnel that, excuse me, that support our school counseling program. Finally, and very importantly, you'll see down at the bottom where you're going to sign, the form specifically asks you to write in what the first day of school for your school is, because it's very sorry, it's very important that you have the document signed within the first 2 months of the school year. Okay, and then the last big piece of the RAMP application that we're going to talk about is the School Counseling Advisory Council. So this is a group of stakeholders that are going to get together to give input on your program. So you're going to look for a variety of people. The purpose of the council is to give you feedback on the goals that you've picked, to look over your results, give you feedback about your results, make recommendations about your program, and to help advocate for you. Your your advisory council should meet a minimum of 2 times a year. And so you're going to see within the RAMP application, within the rubric, it's going to talk about a fall meeting and a spring meeting. And it's very important that your advisory council is only focused on the school counseling program. So it can't be piggybacked onto another meeting. So it can't be a subset of your school advisory council, for example. For each meeting, you're going to have an agenda and a minute and minutes, and you're going to use ASPA's templates for those. And then you're always going to have time for discussion and feedback. So within those minutes, ASPA is going to want to see that people asked questions and that you responded to their feedback, that you incorporated their feedback. Again, it's not just the counselor making a presentation. So when you're getting started putting together your advisory council, you want to make sure that all stakeholders are represented. So you're going to have parents, you're going to have teachers, administrators, community leaders, or business partners, and if appropriate at your level, students. And you want to make sure that the representation of diversity in your council is equal to that of your school setting. And in your very first meeting, what you're going to do, you're going to send out an invitation before the meeting starts that details what the council is all about, what's the purpose, what's the responsibility of a council member, and you're going to talk about what is your comprehensive program. Because keep in mind that a lot of people, especially community leaders, teachers, people outside of our school counseling offices, still are getting used to that idea of what a school counselor is versus what a guidance counselor is and what it means to be a part of a comprehensive program. So you're going to give them that information within your invitation, and especially at that very first meeting. And you're also going to talk about your data. So a big part of the advisory council is sharing your data with these stakeholders so that you can get their input. So I'm just going to show you quickly. This is, and you probably recognize that I cut it right off of my annual administrative conference. This is our advisory council for this year. So we met in October. We're scheduled to meet again on May 4th. We do have a variety of people. We are lucky that we have our school board member who sits on our council. So that's huge for us because she's getting a firsthand look at what we as a school are doing, what we as a department are doing. And she can also give us feedback when we start talking about something that's happening on our campus. She's able to give us a district-wide view of what the county is thinking and what they're focusing on. All of our school counselors, we have 7 counselors at our high school. All of them are a part of our advisory council. We have parents and teachers. We have our district school counseling program planner who sits with us. Our principal is on our council, as is the director, our assistant principal, who's the director of student services, so who oversees discipline for us. We have our community liaison. He is a volunteer that helps manage volunteers and business partners with the school. And then we also have a representative from TRIO who sits on our council, which is great. And then finally, every year we do at the high school level, we do invite students to be a part of our council. So typically what we do, we look for a 10th, 11th, and 12th grader. Our 12th grader is usually the SGA president, since that student was elected to represent the student body. Then when we are looking at our 10th and 11th grade students, we're looking to include, again, diversity of students to match our population. So this year, our junior student is a member of our AVID program, and our 10th grade student is actually one of our 35 Hispanic males. So that's our advisory council. And at the beginning of the year, what I did was write an invitation to them, and this is what it looks like. And I stole most of it straight from ASCA, but just again, giving an overview, here's what we are looking to do with our advisory council. This is the purpose. This is what your responsibilities would be. And we would appreciate your participation and your feedback.
Yeah, the Hispanic male that we did, you wouldn't typically think you would have a student that has below a 2.0 on an advisory council, but he was invaluable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Gave some really great insight on some of the programs that we were doing and what's helpful and what's not helpful from the student perspective. And so then just to kind of wrap up, so we talked about like that very first meeting that you're going to talk a lot about what your program, what is a school counseling program, But on an annual basis, your fall meeting is where you're going to reflect on the previous year. If there's data that you didn't have at last year's spring meeting, you're going to follow up with that, final data reports. And then you're going to talk about what your current data has shown, and so what your goals are for the coming year. And you're going to talk to the council about what your plans are to address that goal. And then in the spring meeting, you'll discuss your progress toward meeting the goals. Again, you won't always have final data reports, but where are you so far? So in May, we're not going to be able to tell them what what our Hispanic males final GPAs are, but we are going to be able to tell them, where are we toward meeting that goal. We're going to give an overview of what our program events, how our programs were run this year. And then talk about what our plans are for the upcoming year. Just to give you an idea, like a story that I love to tell about the value of a school counseling advisory council. We had one year we had our student members who were talking about how they really wanted to have a college fair on our campus. In our district, we have a district-wide college fair that just is phenomenal. And then we have a couple of high schools that also have very successful college fairs. And so we were kind of thinking about how would we make that work? Because, there are already so many other opportunities in trying to get those colleges to come back. And it was right around the same time that we were talking about how we were putting together our college signing day. And through some of the ideas that came up through our school counseling advisory council, we have this idea, and we put together our school counseling, our signing day, our college signing day now is a college fair. And what we do is we invite colleges to come, and they set up during lunch, and they congratulate the seniors who are signing and committing to attend. And at the same time, our underclassmen are able to go up to each of the tables and talk to the schools and get information from them. And that, like I said, that idea really stemmed out of some of the discussion and feedback we got from our advisory council. So that kind of sums up those 4 big pieces that we were going to talk about today. Just so you know, some of the resources I definitely suggest that you check out. So of course, the national model itself and the implementation guide. And then ASCA's RAMP website is very detailed. You can download all the templates. You can see examples of RAMP schools. It has step-by-step. It's got a section of I'm thinking about applying. Okay, I think I'm ready to apply. I've looked at all of this and I'm not anywhere close. How do you suggest I get started? It's got a lot of great stuff. So you should definitely check out that. And that's it. If there are any questions, thank you guys for attending today.
Thank you, Megan and Rick. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your experience with RAMP. We now are going to take questions. If any of our webinar viewers would like to ask any questions, you can unmute your microphone or you can put them in the chat. While we're waiting for that, if you would please, if you did not put your name, your district, your level, and your email, if you would please do that in the chat. And also, if you would please fill out the survey. Holly, if you would please put that in the chat. We'd like for you to take a moment before we finish with questions and answers and log off tonight to give Rick and Megan some feedback on tonight's webinar. So Holly, do we have any questions in the chat that we need to put out there?
There are not any questions as of right now, just that this is very informative and thank you. That is all that's in there right now. And then the survey link to take the survey.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. You see Rick and Megan have left their contact information here on the last screen. If I know it's a lot of information and sometimes it's hard to take it all in at once and process what you're going to do with it, but Rick and Megan, I assume that since you left your email addresses that people can reach out to you and ask you any questions that they may have as they begin to tackle the ramp process.
Absolutely.
For sure.
All right, awesome. So we'll give people just a minute to complete the survey, and if you have any questions or anything that you would like to say, if any of you have started the ramp process, if any of you have questions specific to not just tonight's presentation, but Megan and Rick have been through the entire ramp process, so they might be able to answer some other questions other than just what they presented on tonight.
So I do have a question. This is Holly. And have you always had such supportive administrators? And if you have not, how have you, or have you just been blessed the entire time to have had such great administrators who see the value added that counselors bring to the school?
I think we did. We opened the school 18 years ago, and that was one of the conditions that the first principal had was she contacted the lady that was the head of our department for a number of years, Betsy Lyon, who is was around forever, amazing, and she told her to put together a dream team is what she told her, and she said, because I want you to do counseling and not much else. I want you to focus on the kids. And when I interviewed for the job, that's my first question. When they interviewed me, they said, "Do you have any questions?" And I just said, if you're going to be student focused, I would like the job. If you're not going to be student focused, I'm really not interested in being at a school that's not student focused. So we've been absolutely blessed with having administrators that back us and see our value.
That's great.
And I would say that this process helps us to continue to document so that they continue to see the difference that we're making. And so if they come to us and they say, we need somebody to proctor AP exams, then we're able to say, okay, well, we could do that, but this is the thing that we already told you we were planning to do during that time that we wouldn't be able to do to meet the goals that we had set. So this process helps us to continue that relationship with administrators to see our value.
And it's not just anecdotal evidence.
Mhm.
When you have hard data,
Right.
and our, the end goal obviously is a graduation rate. And when our
Right.
graduation rate is over 98% every year, they do see the value in what we're doing.
Right. It's kind of hard to argue with that then.
Correct.
Exactly. Exactly.
Is there any advice, if you had to give counselors thinking about starting ramp, one piece of advice, what would you recommend to get them started in this process?
I would say develop a calendar. Get with your administration, set a calendar, develop one, and be proactive. As teachers, we were both teachers. I was a math teacher. Megan was a social studies teacher. I said, if we had to have a lesson plan for the classroom, what's our lesson plan every day? So, we all know that, not every plan can be executed every single day. In our jobs, sometimes we have to be reactive, but I would say, if you're a proactive department, that would be a great place to start. Just a yearly calendar of what you're going to do and when you're going to do it.
Thank you. I think that helps a lot to have that calendar. Do you have one that you pass out to administrators each week?
I attend a meeting every Friday, and it's usually lengthy because we have a lot, but we've always been a part of it. The school counseling department has always been a part of it, and I bring my calendar to every single meeting. And at the beginning of every single month, I send it out to every single administrator. So there's no question about what we're doing that month. And they also help develop the calendar.
Right.
When we sit down and do our yearly calendar, we invite an administrator, our direct administrator, and they are a major part of what we do and when we do it. We're like, well, do you want us to do that? Yeah, you guys got to do that. Put that on there. I mean, we have the month of April booked, and we all know what the month of April is in high school. That's a testing, it's FSA, it's the beginning of AP and ACE and all that. And we're not touched because we're meeting with students from March 31st through the last day of April. We meet with students one-on-one every single day to do credit checks and also talk about plans to set schedules for next year.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And that's, I mean, that's as it ought to be, because
Exactly.
And that right there, though, we're able to advocate for that because we have the data to show. We run our master schedule. Rick runs our master schedule. And at the end of the summer, we have a rate of like 96%, 98% of our students scheduled, where a lot of high schools don't have those kinds of numbers. We do, because of all of the time that we set up as a department to be meeting with our kids, to be giving them the information that they need to pick their classes, and then building that schedule. And again, we have the data to show that what we do as a department works.
right. Right.
Yeah, again, not anecdotal evidence. When at the end of the summer, when I post the master schedule, it gives you a number, and that number is, how many students are scheduled 100%. And it's usually 98, 99% of our students are scheduled 100%. I mean, there's always going to be the kid that has AP French and ACE Physics the same period. There's nothing you can do about that. But generally speaking, if you're running at 98, 99% for a school of, we're over 3,100, almost 3,200, they're pretty happy with you.
Yeah, absolutely. What student information system do you use? Just curious.
SIS,
Oh, okay.
Student Information System, which we used to use terms
Yeah.
until about 4 years ago.
Yep.
And I tell you, I think we, as a district, we got everything we could out of that
Oh,
program.
yes.
Yeah,
we too.
Now we use SIS, so we can run many more reports and drill
Right.
down the data even more.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious. We use Focus. We had been a terms district as well. I'm in Escambia County up in Pensacola, and but we've moved to Focus. So and there's a lot of reports. It's a much more robust system than terms could ever have hoped to be. But so yeah, interesting.
Yes.
There is a question in the chat. You may have mentioned this, but what's your school counselor to student ratio?
About 500 to 1. I take a slightly smaller load, about 300. And then we have, I'll tell you how valuable it was. Our previous principal came to us and said, for next year, you are getting another counselor. So our district allots 6 counselors per school, per high school, no matter what your population. So if you have a population of 2,000, you get 6 counselors. If you have a population like we do of almost 3,200, you get 6 counselors. So he purchased another counselor for us each year. So right now we have 7 counselors. So that brought the ratio down, to under 500, 490, right at 500. But we were all running at 560, 570.
But would you agree that if you're not having to do clerical duties and 504 coordinating and test coordinating, that even though that is a huge caseload, if you're able to actually work with groups and run groups and have more direct services with students, you can manage it. Would it be better to have less? Absolutely. But and so let me ask you this, who does your 504 coordinating, and do you have dedicated people who do those sorts of things?
We do. That's what he purchased. He purchased a counselor for just the 504 plans.
Gotcha.
Our 504 plans, when we first opened, we're right around 110.
Right.
And I think this year we're at 360, 365.
Mhm.
So they've gone up,
Oh, yes, yeah.
A
Interesting.
tremendous amount, more than 3 times for sure.
Mhm.
And we're fortunate that our counselor that does that is a 504 has become, she was, but has become even more of a 504 plan expert. And also she was writing the plans and everything, but then decided that she also wanted to be their counselor. So, she found that disconnect because at first we started with her being the 504 plan coordinator and we were their counselors.
Right.
And she didn't feel comfortable with that. So she works very hard and we try to give her not anything to do.
Right.
She's plenty busy. So when it comes time to assign any testing or whatever, we excuse her from that.
Right. Interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, I want to say once again, thank you to Rick and to Megan for being with us tonight and sharing with us about RAMP and phase 2, how to build that comprehensive school counseling program. I know I've gotten a lot of ideas and I just want to thank them again and thank all of you for joining us. Be sure you've completed the survey and look for our information about RAMP phase 3 coming up in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Thank you all and have a great evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.